taking photos of birds just sitting there doing nothing. No, really, stop doing that. Up your game and work on creating photos with some zing or action, something that's going to make people want to look at your photos because they really grab your attention and they grab the viewer's attention. That's the idea for this video, which was part of a virtual event that my good friend Mike Milicia and I recorded a few years ago. I thought it would also make a good YouTube video because it focuses on capturing action photos. And again, I think this is something bird photographers are all looking or striving to do, is to capture these action photos. A quick note that Mike Milicia and I have been teaching bird photography workshops here in Massachusetts together for many years for both the Massachusetts Audubon Society and for Hunt's Photo. You can check out a link to Mike's website and Hunt's Photo in the description below, and I encourage you to do that. Okay, back to today's video on action photos. This is the thing that most, if not all, bird photographers would like to do. We're all striving to capture a photo of whatever bird we happen to be photographing at the time. But while you're doing this, you should be waiting for that critical moment when, bam, something happens. Maybe it's a wing flap, the subject is vocalizing, just something other than the bird sitting there. When this happens and you capture an image as you imagine it, you know almost immediately you have a keeper. And again, this is, I think, what we're striving for. This is a photo you're excited about sharing on social media, a print, or maybe you're a member of a camera club and you're going to enter it into a competition. For me, I'm always striving to capture bird photos with some sort of action. I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. And feel free to leave a comment or a question if you'd like me to answer. Also, stick around to the end of the video to see even more photos, which I think you'll enjoy. So let's have a look at some action photos and how you can improve your bird photography.
Basically, what we're trying to say here is, whenever you can, get your subject doing something. I guess a friend of Shawn's coined this thing that he likes to have ings in his picture. And what do you mean by that? Well, you know, feeding, fighting, running, singing, displaying, courting, mating, nesting, doing something. You want the, you know, the more, it just adds more interest to the image, tells more of a story. So always kind of look for that opportunity to get sort of a more implied or actual or implied action into the image. So we've got a bunch of examples here. I think we have 2 each here for each of these categories. We're just going to go through them and just talk about them a little bit. So feeding. So Shawn, right off, you got this great egret.
Yeah, so again, that's, you know, this whole idea of trying to capture something more than just a static bird. Not that there's necessarily wrong with a static bird photograph of any kind, but I think for a lot of subjects anymore, for me, you know, I need something a little bit more before I'm going to press the shutter. You know, and in this case, when you have this type of action unfolding in front of you, you know, you want to be able to take advantage of it. It just, again, it helps in terms of your portfolio and the fact that you're getting photos that are a little bit more expressive and tell more of a story and get the viewer much more excited about what it is that they're seeing in your photography. This little blue heron, you know, this particular bird kind of stayed in this general area, had this nice, fairly still water, and it kept striking down in to grab these small fish, got the shutter speed up a little bit higher to freeze that water, and just kind of put the whole thing together. But again, it's showing the action, it's showing what's going on. It just has a little bit more, you know, excitement and zing to the photo, and the viewer, I think it's more exciting for the viewer to see a photo like this as opposed to maybe just the bird standing there doing nothing.
So another example of feeding, in this case, Bohemian waxwing here in Massachusetts. It's, you know, you basically have to just kind of shoot bursts and hope to get them. These birds are unique in the sense that they just swallow these things whole. They don't chew them or anything. So the nice thing is you can sometimes get them kind of tossing the berry around to get it oriented right to go down the throat. And so that's what I managed to capture here. Another example of feeding behavior is this ruffed grouse in Minnesota. In the wintertime, when the ground cover is all snowed in, they'll just eat the buds off of trees and so forth. So you're getting, again, rather than just a grouse sitting on the ground or a grouse in a tree, you get them reaching for that tree bud to show a little more of a story and behavior. Fighting is another thing. Again, if you're lucky enough to live around a beach where you have shorebirds and especially piping plovers in particular, I will tell you right now, if you ever see more than 2 adults together, chances are there's going to be a fight. So when I see 3 or 4 or 5 congregating, I'll usually drop what I'm doing and get over to that area as quick as possible and try to capture the fights, because you can get some pretty amazing poses, because they're pretty vicious with each other. In this case, sandhill cranes doing the same thing. They're a little more challenging to get fighting, because their idea of fighting is they jump like this one time and then it's over. So if you wait till you see it, it's too late, or hopefully you can get lucky here. And again, just tells a little more of a story, especially like the fact that in this case, I got the 2 onlookers.
Yeah, and so the same thing here. We've got a pair of barn swallows here at one of the Audubon Sanctuary in Marshfield that I love to go to. I think it doesn't really matter what species of bird. There's always little scuffles that seem to break out. And in this case, these 2 birds kind of getting into a little bit. And I will tell you, when I have whatever the subject is, and I've got it lined up in my viewfinder, I kind of bury my eye in the viewfinder and I'm really waiting for that action to unfold, because if you were standing away from your camera, even by a couple of inches, and this all of a sudden started to take place, chances are you've already missed the shot. You really need to be prepared and have your eye kind of buried in the viewfinder for something like that.
He with his eye to the viewfinder wins.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, definitely. Same thing with these limpkins. You know, Myakka River State Park, I spent a lot of time at this particular location when I'm down in Florida. This is one of the better places on the Gulf Coast for limpkins. You know, I've done the Christmas bird count down there for probably almost 20 years. And the limpkin numbers here are through the roof. A couple years ago, I think they were in excess of 100 in the area near the weir. And I noticed over the years, as more and more limpkins were in this particular area of the weir at Myakka, you know, again, they get into these scuffles, and it's kind of similar in a way, I guess, Mike, to we were talking about the sandhill cranes, although these guys tend to throw their feet up, and it happens a little bit more in terms of the amount of time. It's not just one thrust of the legs. They kind of have this little karate action going on or whatever. So when I see this unfolding, particularly it happens when you get one limpkin that has one of the clams and another one wants to steal it from it, is what it comes down to. In this case, they're fighting over the food. So, but you've got to be ready for it, because it happens so quickly that if you're not prepared, it's just, you're going to miss the shot.
Another thing to do is running. You think about flying, you think about other kinds of movement, but you can often get really cool poses of birds just running along. In this case, I managed to get it with both feet off the ground. These guys run really quickly, and it's just as challenging as shooting flight, but it's kind of fun to do. Another example of just getting a unique pose, got that really spread out strut that unless the bird was running along or walking really fast, you're not going to get this kind of a pose if it's just standing there. So it just adds a little more dynamic nature to the photo.
Yeah, and again, just keeping with that theme of running, you know, these sanderlings on the shore, these birds are almost always running. That's what they do, right? And it's a small bird. It can be very difficult to kind of line them up and get that focus point on them. But, you know, again, getting low to the ground and trying to capture that action. In this case, get that foot off the ground, get a little bit of a reflection going on here. But again, just trying to capture that action. It's a little bit more enticing, again, for the viewer to see this action as opposed to just maybe a static shot of the sanderling just standing there. And same thing here with this young skimmer, who's a little bit more in a strut, not necessarily a running, but it's got this strut, but you can see that front foot just kind of off the ground, just ever so slightly, kind of looking back towards the camera again, that low angle, again, just kind of checking all these points that Mike and I have been discussing and trying to execute a shot that just, again, has just a little bit more feel to it.
Yeah, I should have even included walking. Even just with walking, you can get really cool poses and stuff rather than when it's just standing still.
Absolutely.
Oh, this is one of mine, Western meadowlark, bird singing. Again, especially something like a meadowlark, something like a marsh wren, something that's kind of a song sparrow, something that's known for its song. It's always nice to get it with the bill open singing. This is a clay-colored sparrow from up in Montana, same kind of thing. Although in this case, it's the first time I had photographed this bird, and it just took me aback. It sounded more like an insect than a bird. It was pretty cool. But it still opened its bill just as though it was singing.
Yeah, again, trying to capture birds that are singing, you know, with any of the warblers in particular, in this case, this common yellowthroat, this male common yellowthroat, you know, in the spring is going to be typically, although not always, but typically your best opportunity to get these males when they're singing, because they're getting on their territory to display, they're trying to attract a female, and that's what they're going to do. And in some cases, you know, these males get so just involved and entranced with, their singing and trying to attract a female, that on some occasions, they'll let you approach a little bit closer than they otherwise would normally let you get this close to them. Mike was talking about marsh wrens. Same thing goes for these swamp sparrows here locally at Great Meadows National Wildlife Refuge. These swamp sparrows, when they start to sing, again, they just are so intent on vocalizing that they often kind of forget what's going on around them. And by the way, I've found, at least for these swamp sparrows, Mike, that window of when these males are singing aggressively, that window is pretty short. It lasts, I don't know, maybe.
It's like a week or two.
Yeah, it's like 2 weeks at the most. And you can almost one day you can go there and you've got like 3 males that are up on these cattails singing. You go back the next day, it's over. And you almost don't catch it the rest of the spring. It just kind of happens in that one little window. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, when you get a vocalizing bird, definitely with these males, you want to try to hone in on that.
So breeding displays is another thing. This is a ruddy duck in breeding plumage doing its little bubbling display where it kind of vibrates its chest, creates bubbles in the water, makes this cute little cackling sound, puts the little tufts up on its head, puts the tail up. Ruddy ducks are just amazing to see in breeding plumage, both of their appearance and their behavior. It's the closest thing I've ever seen to a living cartoon character. It was like this guy would be back in the reeds and just every now and then he'd come up and it was like the Ruddy Duck Show. It was pretty cool. Another classic type of breeding display of the snowy egret, showing its breeding plumes down at St. Augustine at the alligator farm. Another example in this case of a side-lit sage grouse displaying in really low light in near Malheur Refuge in Oregon. Black-browed albatross doing a little courting behavior, a little billing down in the Falkland Islands. And similarly, another kind of courting behavior of the harlequin ducks along the river near the Mivad area of Iceland. And the classic courting behavior of the Clark's grebes. This was in a lake in California. Mating is also a cool thing to be able to capture when you can. It can be very dramatic poses sometimes. These are American avocets at Bowdoin National Wildlife Refuge on Montana, and then razorbills again on Grimsey Island in Iceland. The trick again, of course, like Shawn said, is going there the right time of year because it's only going to happen for like a 2 or 3 week period.
Yeah, that's the thing with any of these mating shots. You got to be there at the right time. Similarly here with these tree swallows, very common species here in New England in the spring. Again, back at my favorite location, Mass Audubon's Daniel Webster Wildlife Sanctuary, lots of tree swallows, and you get these males and females pairing up. There's lots of nest boxes there for them to nest in, which is why you get all these tree swallows there. So you got to go where the birds are, right? And I notice here, I had to use a slower shutter speed because of the fact I didn't have a whole lot of light, but I like the blur of the wings. If you were going the other way and you had a faster shutter speed, you could stop that action. But here, I think it actually works quite well. And then over in Tanzania, these white-browed cuckoos, we had a pair of them that were mating. This just happened kind of fast in front of us. But again, when you have that opportunity for any sort of breeding pairs of birds, be prepared for it. Line up your shot. You get your composition the way you want it. Check your exposure. In this case, we had a nice perch, unobstructed, and you're able to pull it off.
And then nesting birds. So in this case, photographing nests, of course, has a lot of ethical concerns. I tend to not do it very often, except in circumstances like this at the alligator farm, where basically these birds nest right along the boardwalk of the bird rookery there. It's just going on all around you. It's a very cool place to visit. You can see the entire life cycle from laying eggs to incubating to the chicks being hatched to the feeding, and it all happens within, say, often 10 or 15 feet of the boardwalk. It's a pretty cool spot. But there's just tricolored heron feeding the 2 little chicks here. Another example of a nesting situation in the Falkland Islands, where none of the birds on the Falkland Islands have ever had any land predators. So they generally have no fear of people. I mean, you don't move quickly, you move very slowly and you stay very quiet and so forth and so on. But they really don't react to people much at all. In fact, if you sit down, say within 20 feet of a penguin colony, chances are in a few minutes you're going to have penguins trying to untie your shoes. It's a pretty cool spot.
Yeah, and the same thing here. We've got you know, a nesting common loon up in Maine. I'm actually sitting in a blind to photograph this shot because I didn't want to disturb the bird. So I actually had to get into the blind just before sunrise, so I wasn't disturbing the birds. And I had this nice still water, all the green vegetation right along this little cove. Again, as Mike was mentioning just a little bit earlier about, you know, nest photography in general, you got to really be careful about where and when you're going to do it. I know for me, I'm the same way, Mike. I don't really do a lot of nest photography. It has to be the right circumstances where I know I'm not endangering the bird, the nest, the eggs, the young, so on and so forth. So yeah, you really want to be very aware of that. The case here with these great horned owls at Presque Isle State Park in Erie, this is a very well-known nest site. These owls have been nesting at this particular stump for probably the last 4 or 5 years, I think. It's going to be a real shame at some point when that log falls over, Mike. There's going to be a lot of disappointed birders and bird photographers. It's right off of a bike path, which is no more than a minute walk from the road. So this is not something that's kind of off limits to people. It's very well known. It's roped off usually each spring. All the folks that go there to view these particular owls are very aware of it and abide by the rules, as it were, and don't cross that line. But it affords a nice opportunity to photograph these owls. I will tell you, in many cases, when I've seen a great horned owl nest, some other locations, they just don't kind of have this type of opportunity. So when you do have this type of opportunity to photograph a nest like this, where you know you're ultimately not going to be endangering the birds, then I feel comfortable with it myself. And these birds have successfully fledged young out of this nest every year that I'm aware of since they've been there. So there you have it for the INGs, Mike, right? Trying to capture that action,
Yep.
trying to capture something a little bit different, not just the bird sitting there. So, you know, again, try to up your game, as it were, and capture that sort of action. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and remember to help protect wildlife and help protect wild places. Cheers. Okay, let's have a look at some more action photos. Take care.